86, the novel, was given to me by my friend and now producer, Aaron Glick. And I read it, I think I was 24 years old, and I was the exact age of BJ in the first half of the book. And I immediately identified with him because he was a young, promiscuous New Yorker in search of a boyfriend, and I was a young, promiscuous New Yorker in search of a boyfriend. And then the book fast forwards, and it turns into what we know of the AIDS crisis. And it was the first time I really identified with that time because I identified so strong with the character. And immediately, Aaron and I sought out the rights to adapt it at the time into a screenplay, but we were young and dumb and inexperienced, so we didn't know what we were doing. So nothing really happened with it. And then a few years later, I wanted to revisit the project, so I then readapted the screenplay into a play, and Aaron read it, and he said, I think you accidentally wrote the blueprint for a musical. And at the time, he was becoming an up-and-coming producer, and he wanted to work on this. So I didn't know, I had done musicals in high school and college, but I had never written one. So he started searching, and he knew of Sam's work, and you were the first and only person we met with.
I booked it.
You booked it. We went to a gay bar in Hell's Kitchen,
yeah.
and you had read the play and the book.
I had not read the book. I read the play and thought it was great, and then I read the book, and then I think one of the reasons that I wanted to do the project was because I loved both forms. I loved the play version and I loved the book, but I loved how you adapted the book, and there were just some really smart choices in how to make it theatrical that to me once I saw that, and I knew you were someone I should work with and should write with. Was just really, you just took the life of the book and then made it into a piece of theater, and then it was really exciting to then take that and then make it our own thing. And it's fascinating. I kind of want to go back someday and read the old version or the play or
I know. I keep thinking I should open up that file, and I think I'm afraid of it.
Yeah. I was thinking because that's crazy that we you're saying that you were the age of BJ when you first started doing it, and that we've been developing the show for a while now, and started in our 20s, and now we're in our 30s.
Yes.
And that we've sort of bookended BJ's ages, and that some of this when we started writing was well, I haven't hit 30 yet, and this is what life will be, and now we've come to the other end and well, when I was young,
now
we're
older than the book, the character in the book. But yeah, and then after we met that night, you went home and wrote a song, Ignoring Truth.
Yeah.
Which you sent to us a day later. It was wild.
Yeah.
And it is stunning. And it's the only song in this, it's still in the show, and it's the only song in the show that hasn't changed a single lyric,
it's
right?
It's still exactly the same.
In some way, we kind of wrote to it,
yeah,
I feel.
And I feel that was I don't know, it's just so special when a collaboration actually works, and when there's a spark, and I feel that was the spark, and that was the thing that it clearly one conversation inspired something to go home and create a whole song that then has had life for so long. And just I don't know, we just meeting at a gay bar and tossing around ideas just inspired things, and I think we are able to bring out different elements of each other, and that I love that you're able to bring out qualities in my writing that don't exist without you. And
and we also have the same voice, which is, I think, not the same, but our voices can operate as a singular voice, and I think that's also kind of rare. It's hard in musical theater, and sometimes you can see that line, and I personally don't see that line very often, and I hope people here don't see it either. And that's what's great about our collaboration, is that we just kind of literally speak the same language.
Yeah, and it's just shared goals of I think going back to the first time reading the play version of it, was just like a clear goal. It's always been important to me, and like learning it's always been important to you, of like writing gay characters, writing queer characters that are complex and get to contain multitudes. And I think that's such a rare thing still to see in theater. And I think we, as like audiences, I think we think we're better at it than we actually are. And I think like theater itself is so, people are like, oh, it's gay. And like, especially musicals, like they're so gay. But I think when you actually get down to it, there's really not a lot of material out there that like lets queer people exist fully. And that's what I feel like I'm really proud of with this piece. And that's a goal of mine, is to always write material that gives a stage to queer people to be everything, and to be funny, and to be heartbreaking, and to be complex,
Messy.
and make bad decisions. And they can do all of that. And I love, like, I mean, one of the things we've talked about, like in this rehearsal process, one of the things I love about this show is like, there's this love triangle that happens there, and that BJ gets to fall in love with multiple men in this show, and each one of those loves is valid, and you're like root for each relationship. And I just don't think I've ever seen that before, where like queer love can exist and like not have to fit one neat narrative, and not be like a side arc or a side story, but like you can have these really complex, like conflicting feelings that are all good. And I don't know, just to make room for that is incredible.
Yeah, and also seeing relationships that don't feel like they are mimicking like a heteronormative kind of existence, because so often, and nothing wrong with that. A lot of queer people exist in that world, and they modeled their lives after that, and that's lovely. But I think it's nice to see variation, you know, that like you see love in its all different forms between like friends and sexual partners and ex-boyfriends and potential boyfriends. And it's really beautiful, and that's how I see the world, and I think you see the world, like as complicated, and something that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to life, and that we're all constantly learning that. And like BJ in the events of 86 is 30 years old. And at 30 years old, I certainly didn't know what I was doing. I'm 37 now, I don't know what I'm doing. So like, I like seeing someone figure out life and make mistakes and find joy and find sorrow and find grief and all those things on stage.
Yeah. And I get just in the rehearsal process, I think we've been learning a lot, and in the making of it, we've been learning a lot. And like, I think one of the goals is like widening the umbrella of who gets to be included in a gay experience, and like in a gay show, who gets to be a part of that, and that the gay experience isn't one thing, and it includes all types of people and all types of relationships within that. And I think like there's such, it's so easy to think we're including people in the gay experience and still like be pushing people to the side of it. And that I think I know that's something I wrestle with all the time, of like figuring out where I fit into the gay community. And I think sometimes I just feel very like outside of it. And I don't know, doing this rehearsal process has been beautiful to make room for everyone in this cast and in this story to come in with their experience and add to it, and realize that there is room for all of that. There's room for these like radical sexualities, and there's room for more like ordinary forms of sexuality too, and there's room for all types of intimacy. I think that's the thing that we've run into.
Yeah.
And that like being gay can include going to a bathhouse and like feeling totally at home, and it can also include that not being your experience, and that this show makes room for all of that and lets all of those live openly. I think it's just like beautiful.
Yeah, and part of it's also just not seeing it on its feet, like being developing a new musical is an absolute slog. And sometimes I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy because it takes so long. You write something, you wait, you get a reading, you wait longer, you do a workshop, you wait longer, you're waiting for people to read it, to watch it, maybe come, not show up. And when you finally get a production, you are surprised because like it's only existed for the most part as words on paper or notes on paper or something being awkwardly read from a music stand in a little room on 42nd Street. But now it's like real human bodies with real human stuff, emotions and shapes and fears and expectations, and seeing that is seeing them take care of this work with such vulnerability. Oh, it makes it so emotional because like this is our baby. Yeah. We're not married, but this is our baby as a partnership, you know, and like it's the most important thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
So to see this group of people, not just the performers, but like the whole creative team and everyone in this building take such care of our baby. It when I think too much about it, I could spiral into like all kinds of different directions of happiness, of fear, of love. But seeing them take care of it and embody our work in such a beautiful way and find new things in it that we didn't even know existed because they're real people doing it is so thrilling. And they have found the most beautiful things, and we get to watch it every night now because we're in tech. But soon we get to share it with everyone, and that's a really vulnerable feeling for me because of my attachment to it, and also there's a lot of myself, even though it's adapted from a book. The book doesn't have like a lot of plot. A lot of it is from my life and from your life. So it's vulnerable to put it in front of an audience because I feel like I'm going to be seen as an artist in a way that I didn't expect. But I know that the folks up here are taking good care of it, and I feel safe with them.
Yeah, I think I do think the making of this has been kind of a radical experience and definitely a lot of growth within that, and it just takes so much trust to hand something over to people. And I feel like as the writers, it's a really weird position to be in of like, we made this thing, we've spent 8 years doing this thing, we know this, we think we know this like better than anyone, and now we don't get to touch it. Like when it's in its ideal form, we have nothing to do with it anymore. And so we've made this thing that just is all about setting everyone else up for success, and that's a vulnerability to take a part of yourself and just hand it to someone and let like your ideas and let your like heart like flow through another person. I had like, we talked about this. I mean, I feel like every rehearsal we go home, we're like, this is amazing, this is amazing, this is going on. But like one of the first music rehearsals was just something of like, I don't know, I like wrote these songs and like that have just been me, and the songs have just been me sitting at a piano singing it, or me singing into my microphone, and like it just being a very solitary experience. And then we came into a rehearsal room, and suddenly there were like all of these bodies in a room learning the music, and they went home and they practiced, and then they came back, and I just remember like sitting in the rehearsal room and them singing this like ensemble music and having this moment of realizing this idea that I had in my head that only ever existed here now like came out of my body onto a page and then into someone else's body, and now this music exists through them, and like it actually only exists because of them. And how like intimate that is to share your work with someone and have someone else bring your work to life and bring you to life in this way is mind-blowing. And then to do it in a space like Diversionary that has been so, as I said, like treating with care, and it's just been all about care and all about letting everyone be intimate in their own way. I don't know, I keep thinking about, I feel really proud of like how the show has been made and how this rehearsal process has happened, that I keep coming back to the idea of, I think we're in a moment of like reckoning with theater and with theater practices and how to take care of performers and take care of artists. And that I think there's just been a lot of effort put into taking care of people. And that what I feel proud of, like even beyond the show, which will be great, is that like the making of it feels good. And that it's been, the show could like open and flop, and like if it like closed first performance or whatever, but like that, I don't want it to happen. It's gonna have a beautiful, healthy life. Yeah. But like, what would matter most? That wouldn't matter to me, as long as what I think has happened. That I think people, it's meant something to the creators of the show. I think the actors, it's meant something to them, and that I could make something that like helps someone learn something about themselves and helps them heal or helps them like be proud of their identity. That's everything to me. And like if a musical also happens on top of that, like cool. That's great.
Yeah, and also just like knowing that I think Diversionary and everyone here has created an environment that just empowered everyone to speak up and be careful with one another and thoughtful with one another and ask for consent about everything, not just the stuff that has to revolve around sex because the show is about sex. But I think we can take that energy moving forward in whatever the next things we do, whether it's a future production of 86, God willing, or whatever the performers go on to do next. That like, I think we've all learned something about ourselves and the way we want to interact with theater and make art, and that we can kind of insist moving forward for better, right. And teach others how to create art the way we just did for the past few weeks. Yeah. And we've watched a lot of conversations about the reckoning of how theater is made. And even though we're back now, like watching other people still fumble, and I feel like we're doing it kind of right. I don't want to say we're doing it perfectly, but like we're making all the right gestures, and it feels really good. And I love learning from everyone. I love when someone says I'm wrong. I love when someone wants to make me better. And I think everyone likes that energy here.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I think that we always want to tell queer stories, but specifically I'm very interested, and I think you are too. I know you are. We're interested in exploring our history, and like so much of our history we never learned. We learned once we got older, and we learned it through other people sometimes, but there also wasn't a generation. The generation in front of us wasn't around because it was decimated. So there's a big learning curve for young queer people, starting with people our age. And the people who are younger than us, it's really a big curve. So I think that like we wanted to create this piece to just tell people that something happened back then that was really horrifying and also coalescing for the community. And as much, anger and rage and heartbreak that was felt back then, there was a lot of love felt back then too. And that love is what kind of kept us going. And I want people to realize that. I want people to leave the theater and reflect on the show and reflect on their relationship with what happened 30 years ago with the AIDS crisis. And I want them to like ask themselves what they know, what they learned, what they didn't learn. I want them to ask like, if they're our age, to ask their parents what they knew. Like, where were you? What were you watching on TV? Did you hear about it? Did you know anyone who was sick? Or just like ask an elder, a queer elder, like, are you okay? What did you go through? And I think people who are not in the queer community can do those same things too. Just reflect on what they know and what they don't know. And just ultimately, I want everyone just to see each other. I think the show, there's like physical gestures of, our protagonist ignoring his memories. Physically, doesn't look at them. And by the end, he does. And that means something to those memories, and it energizes him to like lead, to do more with his life for other people and for himself. And I think everyone can grab hold of that, so that when they leave the theater, they just start looking at people more and asking people about themselves and consider who they are in this grand scheme of life.
Yeah, I think like as I think a common experience for queer people is we don't get to pass our stories down to each other. We don't get like generations passing their history on to the next generation. I feel like you step, like, from my experience, and I think a lot of queer people have had this experience, I feel like I stepped into this like identity and like came out and had no idea what the identity that I was stepping into actually was, or like how myself and my identity fits into a larger historical narrative, that it felt like I stepped into it blind. And never had a queer person tell me what it was like to be queer, or what their life was like, or what I could expect from it. And it was only ever through a straight perspective. And the idea of what it was like to be gay was through what straight people told me what being gay was. And it feels so important to have queer people making queer content for queer audiences, and to pass that down and to get to be this link between generations, and this the act of storytelling, keeping our history alive, I think is vital to our existence. And we've talked about this so much, but like I was born in 1986, and the year the show was set, and wrestled a lot with the show of like, why is this my story to tell, and like, do I understand this? And that it's our story to tell because it affects who we are now, and like what those people went through in that decade absolutely affected how I was viewed and how I got to step into my own identity. And a lot of the creative team shared that, and I definitely had the experience, like when I came out, the first thing I heard was, you're going to get AIDS. And that was the main concern, was that I would get AIDS. And that was the first thing said when I said I was gay.
Same.
That's the immediate response. And it just, that has such an effect on who I am, and like this history that I feel like I didn't get to see fully was used as like a tool of fear for me, and was like, I think, used to suppress identity and to make being queer a scary experience. And so I feel like thrilled to get to bring more light to all the other aspects of the queer experience, and that generation that we lost to AIDS was full of life and full of love, and that we get to bring those qualities to the foreground now, and get to say that was also a part of the experience, and that we get to, I think, in telling the story, and like we get to be the generation that links the older and the younger generation. That I think the younger generation, I think a lot of them don't know this history, and we get to pass it on, and we get to be, in a way, I guess, we talk about chosen family with the queer identity, and that, in a way, maybe that's similar to, I just think about like ancestors passing down history from generation to generation, that we don't get that experience, and we sort of get to be the way that this story is passed down from generation to generation, and we get to take literally a novel written by someone of the previous generation, make it our own thing now, and we get to hand it off to the next generation and see what they do with it. It's necessary.
Yeah. I mean, I hope they don't write 86 too, because that would be weird. But and I think it's also important to remember, like, this is a very heavy conversation on very heavy topics, but like the show is really fun.
Yeah.
Like it's full of a lot of joy, and like we've been very deliberate about that. That like so much of the AIDS media that we grew up with or were exposed to as we were younger was rightfully so, coming from a certain place of frustration and fear and anger, and like we just also want to find another color within that, and how are we in conversation with those pieces, that like the show explores love and intimacy and the height of sexual freedom for some people that I think is really thrilling and fun and sexy to see that on stage. See it anywhere, but to see it on stage with a bunch of like queer bodies doing that is so exciting, and your music is so exciting, and it feels...
You should dance to it.
You should dance to it.
Joyous, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how that feels in the room, but but yeah, I think people are gonna be so surprised by how much joy they feel in here, all the emotions they feel, and I hope that the final gesture they leave with is something really positive and lovely.
But that's like a huge part of being queer, is like the suffering and like heartbreak is always mixed in with love and with joy, and trying to find humor within that, and like it's just a survival tactic. And I think that's what like the book does so well, the novel does so well, is like it's funny, and it's like got to be like irreverent at times, and it was like thrilling to read that and then see what our version of that is, that we can find humor within this, and that it's in fact like a deeper honoring of the time and of that experience, to allow all of the emotions to come out at once, and not have to treat it as like only highlighting how horrible it was, but we get to highlight how much like love there was too. And I also think if we're widening out into like not specifically just the queer experience, although it's very important to me that it's a gay show by gay people, and like the gay people will love it. That I think I just brought a human experience. It's been I think so, what am I saying right now? I'm saying okay. So with I think one of the things of working on the show for so long now, that some of these moments in the show are things we wrote like 6-8 years ago, and that a lot of life has happened in between those moments. And sometimes I look at this show as like parts of it are like this message from like a younger version of ourselves to hold on to hope and to hold on to love. And that especially this last 2 years with the pandemic, that life has shifted for everyone. And I know for me, like life definitely changed, and I felt like I put a shell around myself, and it's very easy to feel isolated and to shut the world out and to protect myself. I felt like I am BJ in that way, that to protect myself, I had to shut the world out in a way. And that now I'm realizing I can't shut the world out, and I actually need to let that shell crack. And I feel like this like younger version of me wrote a message to myself now to like open yourself up to humans, and to let yourself be vulnerable, and to like seek people out in the hard times. And I feel like when I wrote it when I was younger, I thought that was an easy message. And I think life made that a hard message now. And that's much more complicated to actually do, to like let go of fear and to actually embrace community. I feel like I'm actively wrestling with that now. And so I feel it's so exciting to watch the show and get this message. Just to me, I'll just take the message. I'm like, I just need to learn this.
Yeah, but even beyond that, even beyond like what's happened in the time between, like we are also at this kind of frightening point. We've talked about this earlier this morning. We're in this point in our history where like we're kind of at a precipice or a tipping point where like we can or cannot get better and get more or less rights as a people. And, there's all, the don't say gay stuff, all of the, the horrible, legislature that's attacking trans people right now, like, that's really scary. And especially coming off of the pandemic, we are in that shell, as you said, and we have to get out of that. We have to fight for each other. And this is not the same as the AIDS crisis, but it's a scary situation that people were afraid to act up in, and they had to learn to do that to save each other. And I think we need to take that same energy now. So I hope also the show can energize people to just look at each other and activate to help each other. And I think that's also the final gesture of the show. No spoilers, but like that like BJ learns to do something really positive with his life after not doing that for so long.
Yeah, to like rely on people and to trust people and to help
fight for people.
Yeah.
I think that's good, you guys. This is great.